Wow. Okay, I'm not sure whether or not I'm gonna give it 10 out of 10, but this looks like a bit of a soul read to me. So Ankes raises to 2.5x. He's a Polish reg with a big stack. UKU, he won the Sunday Million a few months ago, I believe. He's been playing some high stakes lately. He 3-bets, and he 3-bets quite large. So Ankes is going to play quite tight against his sizing, whereas if UKU makes it like 45, 9 big blinds, obviously Ankes is going to play way looser. He calls. So this board is really good for Ankes, right? He probably has 10s, 9s, 8s, 7-6, Queen Jack, 10-9, maybe 8-9, maybe 10-8. He's going to have hands like Ace-Jack of clubs that have a ton of equity no matter what. So UKU has to be extremely careful on this board, right? I mean, even if UKU has a hand as good as Jacks or Aces, it's not that fantastic. But at the same time, he's going to check a lot, which means that Ankes is going to have to be careful too, right? Because even though Ace is not the nuts, it's still a good hand. So Ankes is not going to stab a ton here. He's going to be somewhat polarized when he stabs. He checks behind. So he likely has some kind of medium strength showdown value or a no equity hand, or maybe some kind of decent draw that he doesn't want to bet fold or bet and then give up with. The turn is a 9, which is not a complete blank, but it's not that scary, right? Because there's only 2 combos of 8-9 left, and Ankes might have stabbed the flop, or 10-8, Ankes might have stabbed the flop with. So Ankes is really wrapping a hand like Ace-9 suited, King-9 suited, Jack-9 suited, etc. But UKU 3-bet quite large, so not all of those hands are even in Ankes' range, potentially. Ankes could, of course, sometimes check back a straight or set on the flop and now be betting. So he's not representing exclusively a 9. Otherwise, on the river, he's probably going to be really unbalanced towards bluffs on, let's say, a blank run out. The 10 doesn't change much. Maybe Ankes made a thin value bet with hand like King 10 on the turn. UKU could check call hand like Jack 10 on the turn. But I think he's got a decent amount of overpairs as well. So at this point, I think that Ankes can still shove all in with a 9. Because UKU doesn't have a ton of 10s. Ankes has King 9 offsuit. I don't want to say it's a horrendous preflop call because that would be giving him too much credit. This is okay, let's just say horrendous. This is a horrendous preflop call. Especially because I was just analyzing that UKU 3-bet so large, and therefore, he's getting a worse price on a call. The SPR is going to be lower, so you have less playability in position. Your hand is offsuit, dominated, disconnected. I mean, yeah, I'm sorry, Ankes. I like you. I still remember that time when I squeezed preflop with Queen 7 offsuit and hit a full house against you, and then you told Daniel on Skype. I remember that. So in that way, we're connected as buddies, but I can't defend you on this one. I'm sorry. This is horrendous. UKU 3-bets Ace-Jack. That happens sometimes, around 25% of the time. If Ankes calls hands like these, then I would like to see UKU always 3-bet, of course, right? Because you'll get thin value from hands like Ace-9 offsuit and whatever. He checks the flop with a bettable hand, so he could be checking his whole range. Maybe he bets sometimes, who knows. On the turn, he's probably thinking that Ankes is not folding a better hand and he still dominates some other stuff, so it's okay. And on the river, I mean, I don't really like the call too much. He's thinking he blocks Ace-9 offsuit, but I don't think before the hand he knew that Ankes was likely calling that. So I don't like this call down very much. I think he can still have a 10, he can still have a 9, he can still maybe have a straight, although that doesn't make that much of a difference. He can have some other better hands to call down with that are not the nuts. So Ankes' play is a 3.5 out of 10. The preflop call is -2 out of 10. The flop check back is good. The turn bet is usually good. And I like the fact that he's not too scared with the 10 and still shoves all in. So most of the hand was played right. But the thing is, if you play the beginning of a hand wrong, it's really difficult to correct yourself, right? Whereas if you played the whole hand right until the river, there's only one straight mistake. UKU, I think, played his hand fine pre-flop, fine on the flop, decent on the turn. It's a shitty spot, of course, on the turn. On the river, I don't like the call, so I'll give him a 5 out of 10. We've got some purple and purple action right here. Small open raise by Demon Doink. I like that name. Standard 3-bet size by Def Prophet. I also like that name. The avatar is a bit more questionable. So this flop is really good for imposition's 3-bet range. Obviously, he has aces every single time, whereas Demon Doink likely never has aces. He probably has 8s and 4s at some percentage as well. Quarter pot bet. You could go a bit larger, but I like it. And Demon Doink decides to check raise quite large here. This is a board on which you're doing a decent amount of check raising, not too much calling, so sizing could have been a little bit on the smaller side, but you know, looking good so far. Nothing wrong with either play. So Def Profit is probably going to continue with every ace, every flush draw, some gut shots, an occasional like King Queen of Hearts float or 10-9 of Hearts float, but not so often. And obviously his other strong hands. And then he's mostly folding hands like Jack 10 of Spades, etc. You know, the hands with no potential. Demon Doink decides to bet large now. He bets quite big, so even a hand like Ace 8 or Ace 4 is, you know, starts becoming less attractive if he even has those hands pre-flop. So he's mostly representing 8s or 4s. As I said, Def Profit can definitely still have a hand like Pocket Kings here. So Demon Doink has to watch out a little bit. I don't think that Def Profit needs to have too many raises here. If Demon Doink were to block bet here, like something like $80, then he definitely needs quite a sizable raising range. But Demon Doink is really not representing that many hands. So if the SPR were a bit lower, I think Def Profit should definitely have quite a few shoves. He's mostly still repping a set. Call by Def Profit. And now, the thing is here, Demon Doink keeps changing his story, right? On the flop, he's saying I have like maybe Ace Queen, maybe Ace King, but maybe Ace 8 or 4s. On the turn, it's already questionable whether or not he bets Ace 8, Ace 4. And now on the river, he's never repping 2-pair anymore, right? So he's representing a set. But he's going all in for a stack and a half when Def Profit can still have, you know, aces, kings, a flush, maybe 8s in case Demon Doink has 4. So even a set is a very questionable shove. So now he's representing either an occasional straight, right, with Queen Jack of Hearts maybe, or he's representing a flush. But if he had like King Queen of Clubs, let's say, or King Jack of Clubs, he probably would check the turn, right? And he cannot have Jack 10 of Clubs. So what is he repping then, right? He's representing like 6-7 of Clubs or something like that. So he's not representing a whole lot. At the same time, he's also not representing too many bluffs. He could have a hand like, for instance, Jack 10 of Hearts that he thinks has no showdown value, but, you know, gets a lot of fold equity. So it's a bit of a strange line here. I think he can definitely introduce some block bets as well for like 150 to 200. But he should have a shoving range, just a narrow one. Def Profit is obviously calling all his, you know, flush draws plus pairs or, you know, plus other equity. Okay. Nice life. Huge pot on the river. You have the nut. You don't have to think anymore. It's just like, if you bet small, you shove. If he shoves, you call. And if he checks, maybe then you could bet smaller if you like, but mostly shove. So I think Def Profit's play is perfect. It's not a difficult play, well, right? 3-bet is obvious. The C-bet range is obvious. Calling the check raise and then calling down is obvious. I think there's no other way to play his hand. So the difficulty factor is very low. However, his line is perfect. As for Demon Doink, a few years ago, I would have for sure said this is a check raise on the flop, but I'm pretty sure if you sim this one, 10-9 doesn't get check raise very often here. It looks like an appealing hand to check raise, right? 2 overcards to the 8, backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw. You block Ace 9, Ace 10 suited, Ace 10 offsuit potentially. This play is not used nearly as much as you would think. On the turn, his bet is aggressive but alright. On the river, I do like the fact that he bluffed here. You could say you need a club in your hand, but how do you have like a 1 club hand, right? Are you turning Ace Queen into a bluff here? Probably not. So I do like the fact that he bluffed. He could also bluff with a smaller sizing if you like, but I do like the bluff. The flop play and the turn play are just a little bit questionable. So it's an alright play, but if you always play your hand like this, you know, all your back doors and like your 4-5s or 8-7s, etc., then you're definitely out of line. And you cannot get too out of line deep stacked on an Ace-King high board, right? Def Profit's play is a 9.5 out of 10. Only Limos gets 10 out of 10. And Demon Doink's play is a 6 out of 10. So one of our students and coaches, jimmiduraide, open raises to 11.5. Anka's 3-bets, a little bit on the larger side, which is okay. An easy sniper, whom I've never seen. He's unmarked, cold calls. This is a play I don't recommend yes, you're deep stacked, but that doesn't necessarily improve your situation, right? I mean, if anything, I want to do this less often when deep stack, because now I give my opponents a chance to win a bigger pot against me. You have less playability. I mean, in position has more playability, so I'd be extra careful here. So in his shoes, I would either 4-bet quite large, and then you'd be committed to calling it off against Marcel. But obviously, when you call 4-bet here, Marcel is not going to get it in that light, right? So you don't have to worry too much about him. So yeah, I would 4-bet to probably 110, something like that. If I do 4-bet, and I would not have any cold calls. So Jimmy makes it 142. I think that's an alright sizing, being so deep. Otherwise, you could go maybe a bit smaller. I don't think Easy Sniper cold calls too many awful hands here. So he'll call some pocket pairs, some suited hands, some big cards, but some guys maybe call 5-4 offsuit here, but most guys don't. So it's unlikely that Easy Sniper folds. So I like 4-betting quite light here, getting Ankas out of the way. If Ankas has a hand like pocket 10s, he probably just has to fold, right? It's a really ugly spot for him. So if he folds a good hand, then if Easy Sniper does fold, you win a big pot. And if he calls, then you know that your pocket queens or whatever are nearly the nuts anyway. And you get to play deep stacked in position. Ankas does fold. This is what Jimmy wants. And Easy Sniper calls. This board is definitely good for both ranges. Both of them could have pocket kings. I don't think Jimmy has 10s too much unless he thinks Easy Sniper is really out of line. Easy Sniper is going to have it a little bit more often. And he's going to have some hands like ace queen, pocket queens, pocket jacks. Maybe some hands like 7s or maybe some flush draws. It really depends on how wide he cold calls. Really small bet here, which I like. And a check call. The 6 adds a few draws to the board, but if you think about it, like, how does anybody have 8-7 suited, right? Unlikely. How does anybody have a spade draw? Somewhat unlikely. So the board looks very wet, but it's not as wet as you would think. So you can't just look at the board and say, oh, 2 flushers out there. Well, how does either one actually have one, right? 5-4 has a straight draw, but how does anybody really have 5-4? Half pot bet by Jimmy. That's okay. Call by Easy Sniper. Easy should be shoving all in quite a bit here, actually. But he check calls, and with half pot behind, Jimmy goes all in. And ouch. So Jimmy has kings. I definitely like his 4-bet. I definitely like his flop bet on the small side. Turn could have been a little bit smaller, maybe just specifically with this hand. Again, you're playing against somebody unknown, so you can mix it up a little bit more. Easy Sniper has 3s. This cold call and calling as a 4-bet is obviously way too loose, and he should be shoving all in on the turn. If Jimmy has a hand like ace king or aces, for instance, he's going to check back this queen of spades maybe, right? Whereas if you shove, he calls. So you get value and, you don't lose action. So Jimmy's play here, I would say, is a 9 out of 10. Maybe the turn size could have been a little bit smaller with exactly this hand. Easy Sniper gets a 4 out of 10. Preflop is too loose. Flop, I mean, normally when you have a set and a 3-bet pot, you want to check raise, right? But I don't know what his range looks like, so it's hard to predict what you should do. And on the turn, he should definitely shovel in, get value from hands like aces and a king, and get protection. Because as I said, maybe Jimmy folds aces here, or maybe he checks behind with aces on the river, and you really don't want that. Sanctity raises, obviously end the raise with, and I hope Jimmy 3-bets. I like it. I like the sizing. And this flop, Sanctity probably has all sets at a decent frequency, but Jimmy will definitely have 10s, maybe have 5s and 3s. But Jimmy obviously has way more jacks plus that Sanctity doesn't often have. Also, Jimmy will have fewer like disconnected crappy hands that Sanctity does have. So I think he can bet quite aggressively here. So ace queen is basically like a value protection bet, trying to build a pot on later streets when he does hit. Sanctity calls, so he's got a lot of pairs. He's got some like good showdown value hands. He's got a couple of floats, like hands with diamonds in them, for instance, preferably with overcards as well, and backdoor equity. Jimmy checks here. Obviously, he's going to be checking quite a bit. And Sanctity goes for the half pot and a bit sizing. I think he could even stab a little bit smaller here, go for a thin value and protection. It's a board that's quite dry, so most people don't check raise too much here. So, yeah, I think he could stab a little bit more thinly here, actually. I don't mind this. If you were to sim this, probably would tell you to bet this size and bet smaller. But I think a small size is also pretty cool. Jimmy gets to check shove a decent amount here. Yes, the board is somewhat dry, but it's still pretty good for you. I actually misread the board for a second. I thought it was 10-5-3 deuce, but even on that board, you could check shove a decent amount. On the 3, you check shove a little bit less, because now Sanctity's aces don't have a gut shot unless he has ace 4, ace deuce. Jimmy calls. Sanctity goes all in. I don't think that he should pick some kind of smaller sizing. If he has a really good hand, he definitely wants to bet like this. If he has a hand like 9s, they already got max value on the turn if you want to bet at all. So I like this sizing for sure. And the GOAT. Wow. Okay. I'm not sure whether or not I'm going to give it 10 out of 10, but this looks like a bit of a soul read to me. So I definitely like Jimmy's 3-bet. I love his flop bet. I like his check on the turn and check call. On the river, so basically what Jimmy's thinking is this. I block ace 4 of hearts, I block ace 10, I block queen 10, and if Sanctity had, let's say, like ace 8 of hearts, he would probably check the river and give up. So even though I block some bluffs, he's not actually bluffing them. So I don't really block anything. But then I unblock all the diamond hands that potentially bluff, as well as hands like 6, 7, and whatever. So this is quite a loose call, obviously. It's based on blockers, just saying, okay, Sanctity doesn't have too many 10x left. This does open you up to getting owned by hands like Jack 10 and whatever. But maybe he thinks that Sanctity is full of it. So I'll give him 9 out of 10. It's a loose call, but it could just be really good. I don't know what he thinks of Sanctity, but either way, this is not a punt. Sanctity's play, I like the call pre-flop. I like the flop float, even against half pot. The turn bet is a bit more questionable, right? Because you have almost no equity. You don't really block the 10 very well. So as played, he should definitely shove all in with this hand. I like that. The turn is just getting checked behind a decent amount. So I like a good aggressive play like Sanctity's play. 9 out of 10 for heart, for sure. But the turn bet is maybe a little bit loose.